There is a fundamental rule in chess that most amateurs completely misunderstand. They think the game is about aggressively attacking your opponent's king, but it isn't. True mastery is about controlling the board so quietly, so methodically, that by the time your opponent realizes they are trapped, they had actually built their own cage. My name is Victor. I am 29 years old, and I do not get angry. I get results. For the past 4 years, I spent every waking hour locked in my home office writing thousands of lines of complex C++ architecture. I was building a fully autonomous predictive AI agent for high-end smart homes. It wasn't just a basic voice assistant. It was a system that could learn daily routines, optimize power grid uses in real time, and run advanced local security protocols without ever connecting to an external cloud. It was revolutionary. I called the core framework Aegis. Because I needed specialized servers to train the neural network, I had to take on a small amount of seed funding early on. My father, who is a kind but financially illiterate man, convinced me to take a $50,000 loan from my uncle Richard. Richard is a corporate vulture. He made his millions in the 90s by buying out failing manufacturing plants, liquidating their assets, and firing thousands of workers. He is arrogant, ruthless, and he treats our family like we're his personal employees. But I needed the server space, so I signed the paperwork. What I didn't realize, and what my lawyer completely missed at the time, was a deeply buried predatory clause in the 70-page funding agreement. It stated that if the valuation of the intellectual property ever exceeded $10 million before the loan was fully repaid with compounding interest, Uncle Richard's LLC had the right to instantly convert that debt into an 80% controlling equity stake in my company. I worked in silence. 4 years of grinding. Finally, I secured a closed-door meeting with one of the largest tech conglomerates in the world. I demonstrated the Aegis AI agent. They were completely blown away. The next morning, they sent over a formal letter of intent to acquire my software for $22 million. I was ecstatic. My life was about to change. But in my excitement, I made a fatal error. I told my father. And my father, bursting with pride, immediately called Uncle Richard to brag about my success. Less than 48 hours later, I received a thick legal binder via a private courier. It was a formal, hostile takeover notice. Uncle Richard had triggered the predatory clause. Because the tech conglomerate had formally valued the company at $22 million, Richard's $50,000 loan had instantly legally mutated into an 80% ownership of everything I had built. I was summoned to a boardroom in Richard's downtown high-rise. When I walked in, Richard was sitting at the head of a massive mahogany table smoking a cigar. Next to him was his son, my cousin Todd. Todd is a 25-year-old frat boy who has never worked a day in his life, but Richard had just named him the new CEO of my company. Nothing personal, Victor, Richard said, exhaling a cloud of smoke. It's just business. You are a great little toter, but you don't know how to swim with the sharks. Todd is going to take over the acquisition deal. We are graciously allowing you to keep a 5% non-voting share, provided you stay on for 3 years to maintain the software. Todd smirked at me, spinning a luxury pen on the table. Yeah, bro. Don't worry. I'll make sure you get a nice cubicle downstairs. A normal person would have screamed. A normal person would have thrown the chair, or cried, or spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on a desperate, losing legal battle. I did none of those things. I looked at the contract. I looked at Richard. I took a pen from my pocket, signed the transfer of ownership, and stood up. I resign, I said quietly, effective immediately. Keep the 5%. Richard laughed. Sue yourself, kid. We have the source code. We don't need you. I walked out of the building. I didn't feel defeated. I felt a profound, chilling sense of anticipation. Because while Uncle Richard knew how to read a predatory financial contract, he had absolutely no idea how to read a C++ software repository. You see, when you build an AI agent from scratch, you rely on a massive amount of foundational open source libraries. 6 months prior to the buyout, I had temporarily integrated a highly specific, very powerful open source module for the visual recognition software. But that module came with a strict, legally binding GNU General Public License. It is what developers call a copyleft trap. The license explicitly states that if you use even one line of their code in your software, your entire software must also become open source, completely free, and public domain. If you try to sell it commercially for profit, the original creators of the module have the legal right to sue you for massive corporate damages and seize all your assets. I knew this. That is why I was spending my nights rewriting that specific module from scratch. It was going to take me another month to remove the copyleft code and replace it with my own proprietary architecture before the final sale. But Richard and Todd didn't know that. They didn't conduct a technical audit. They just stole the repository as it was and rushed to close the $22 million deal with the tech conglomerate. I sat in my quiet home office and watched the news. 2 weeks later, the press release went out. Uncle Richard's LLC had officially sold the Aegis AI software to the tech giant. Todd was giving interviews to business magazines, calling himself a visionary tech founder. They were popping champagne on Richard's yacht. I waited exactly 3 days for the money to fully clear into Richard's corporate accounts. Then I made a single anonymous phone call to the legal department of the open source foundation whose code was buried inside Aegis. I sent them the exact directory paths, the file names, and the compiled evidence. The financial execution was absolute poetry. The tech conglomerate, upon realizing they had just paid $22 million for a product they legally couldn't own or patent, instantly froze all contracts. They hit Uncle Richard's LLC with a catastrophic lawsuit for corporate fraud, breach of contract, and intentional misrepresentation. They demanded their $22 million back, plus $10 million in punitive damages. But it got worse. The Open Source Foundation also filed a federal injunction. Because Todd was officially listed as the CEO and lead architect on the transfer documents, he was held personally liable for the IP theft. In a matter of 72 hours, Uncle Richard's entire financial empire collapsed. His corporate assets were completely frozen by federal courts, his offshore accounts were locked. To pay the mounting legal fees and settle the tech conglomerate's massive lawsuit, Richard was forced to liquidate his commercial real estate, sell his yacht, and auction off his own mansion. He was completely, utterly bankrupted. Todd didn't fare any better because he had signed legal documents claiming he wrote the software. He couldn't play dumb. He is currently facing potential federal prison time for wire fraud and intellectual property theft. He cries in court every single time he has to appear. And what about me? Since I had legally resigned and surrendered all equity before the sale, I was completely insulated from the fallout. The tech conglomerate eventually scrapped the tainted Aegis project entirely. 6 months later, I launched a brand new LLC. I released my new, fully proprietary, cleanly coded AI software. I called it Nemesis. The same tech conglomerate, desperate for the tech and knowing I was the true genius behind it, bought it from me directly for $30 million. Today, I live at a quiet, sprawling estate. I don't answer calls from my family. Richard is working as a middle manager at a logistics company, renting a small apartment. Sometimes, true revenge doesn't require raising your voice at all. Sometimes, you just have to hand your enemies a loaded weapon and wait for them to look down the barrel.